Somewhere in Europe right now, a traveler is pulling off a quiet road. The town looks like a postcard, old stone walls, a church bell somewhere in the distance, maybe a cafe with a faded awning. And then a local catches their eye and says with complete seriousness, "Do not stop here. Do not even slow down." Europe sells you a dream. Ancient cathedrals, cobblestone romance, the illusion of civilized safety tucked inside every GPS route. But strip away the tourism brochures and the high-speed rail connections, and you will find something the guidebooks refuse to print. There are places on this continent where industry collapsed and never came back, where the state turned its back and violence moved in, where beauty is the oldest, cruelest lie. We are counting down 10 European towns so volatile, so hollowed out, so systemically broken that locals will tell you the same thing with the same tired eyes. Keep driving. By the time we reach number 1, you will understand that a pretty skyline can be the most dangerous thing of all. Be sure to subscribe and like it. It helps a lot to promote the video. And write in the comments about which cities would you like to see the video. Number 10. Charleroi, Belgium. If you have ever driven south from Brussels, you know the exact moment the landscape changes. The neat farmland gives way to something older and heavier. Steel frameworks, cooling towers standing like hollow monuments, smokestacks that no longer smoke. Welcome to Charleroi, once the beating industrial heart of continental Europe, and today one of the most economically shattered cities on the continent. Charleroi was built on coal and steel. For over a century, it fed the furnaces of an entire civilization. When the industry collapsed in the 1980s, the city did not slowly fade. It dropped off a cliff. Today, unemployment hovers near 30%. Entire districts have been gutted, left with the architecture of prosperity and none of its function. The violent crime rate sits at more than double the Belgian national average. Locals do not describe the danger in dramatic terms. They describe it in quiet, matter-of-fact ones. You do not walk certain streets at night. You do not leave your car unattended in certain zones. You especially do not stop at certain gas stations after dark. Number 9. Bradford, England. If Charleroi is Belgium's open wound, Bradford is Britain's. Once the wool capital of the world, this West Yorkshire city dressed an empire. When that empire undressed itself, when the mills closed and the global supply chains moved east, Bradford was left holding an identity with nothing to put inside it. Today, Bradford ranks among the highest in England for rates of poverty and violent crime. Child poverty in some wards exceeds 50%. The city center, built for a population twice its current economic capacity, echoes. Gas stations here operate behind thick plastic screens. Locals have a word for certain parts of town: no-go. Not dramatic, just accurate. Number 8. Molenbeek, Brussels, Belgium. In November of 2015, the world learned a name it had never paid attention to before: Molenbeek. Within 48 hours of the Paris attacks, investigators traced key perpetrators back to this single Brussels neighborhood of fewer than 100,000 people. The entire continent held its breath. Politicians called it a failed state within a state. Journalists flew in from every capital. And locals, the ones who had been living there quietly for decades, said, "We tried to tell you. Nobody listened." Molenbeek sits just west of the Brussels city center. From certain angles, it looks unremarkable. Narrow streets, flat-fronted buildings, corner shops with hand-painted signs. But the statistics underneath the surface have been alarming for years. Unemployment among young men in certain blocks runs above 40%. Social services are stretched to breaking point, and the police, when they come at all, come in numbers. Not because of one dramatic event, but because of what happens when a government ignores a neighborhood long enough. Molenbeek is not simply a place where danger lives. It is a place where the state made a calculated decision to look the other way and then expressed shock at what grew in the dark. Locals who have spent their lives there will tell you the same thing. It did not have to be this way. But here we are, and here you should not stop. Number 7. Quartier Nord, Marseille, France. Marseille is France's oldest city. It has been a port since 600 BC. For 2,600 years, the sea has brought everything through this harbor: trade, culture, ideas, people. And for the last several decades, it has also brought drugs. The Quartier Nord, the northern neighborhoods that sprawl above the city's famous waterfront, are home to the most active narco-trafficking networks in Western Europe. French authorities have given these districts an unofficial classification that translates, quietly, to "We do not fully control this territory." The numbers are not subtle. Marseille consistently records the highest per capita homicide rate of any major French city. In some recent years, nearly triple the national average. Drive-by shootings in broad daylight have become so routine that local journalists no longer lead with them. The architecture here tells a separate story. Towers built in the 1960s and 70s as a modernist solution to overcrowding, now operating as vertical fortresses carved into competing turfs. Residents describe the experience of living there as a permanent negotiation. You learn the boundaries, you learn the hours, you learn whose car not to park behind. Outsiders do not know these rules. That is exactly why you do not stop. Number 6. Ferentari, Bucharest, Romania. There is a moment, driving into Ferentari, when Bucharest simply stops. The renovated facades, the coffee shops, the slow creep of gentrification that has touched so much of the Romanian capital, all of it disappears. What replaces it is something older and harder. Crumbling concrete tower blocks that lean slightly as though tired of standing. Courtyards that smell of mold and burnt wood. Children playing in spaces that have not seen municipal maintenance in decades. And everywhere, the quiet understanding that the rules operating here are not the ones written in any law book. Ferentari is not a secret. Romanian journalists have been writing about it for 30 years. Social workers go in, sometimes in pairs. Police respond to calls but rarely patrol. The district sits inside the capital of a European Union member state, a city with gleaming shopping malls and a booming tech sector, and functions as its complete opposite. Poverty rates in Ferentari exceed 60% in certain blocks. Drug trafficking runs openly through specific courtyards, structured and territorial. Residents who have lived there their entire lives describe the experience of leaving and returning as crossing a border. There is Bucharest and there is Ferentari, and they are not the same country. If you take a wrong turn on the southern edge of the city at night, you will understand exactly what they mean. The GPS will not warn you. Nothing will. Number 5. Baia Mare, Romania. Most people outside Romania have never heard of Baia Mare. It sits in the northwest of the country, in a valley ringed by the Carpathian Mountains, and it looks, at first glance, like 1,000 other mid-sized post-communist cities. A central square with a medieval tower, a market, a few streets that suggest better days. But in the year 2000, Baia Mare became briefly famous for entirely the wrong reason. A dam holding back toxic mining waste collapsed and released one of the largest cyanide spills in European history into the Tisa and Danube river systems. Fish died for hundreds of kilometers downstream. Drinking water was poisoned across 3 countries. It was called by environmental scientists the worst ecological disaster in Europe since Chernobyl. The mining companies moved on. The cleanup never fully came. What remained was a city stripped of its economic purpose, its environment contaminated, and its population shrinking every year as those who could leave left. Those who stayed inherited the residue, literally and figuratively. Today, Baia Mare struggles with some of the highest poverty and organized crime indices in northwestern Romania. The environmental legacy has created a community living with generational health consequences and zero economic buffers. Locals do not warn you about Baia Mare the way they warn you about Ferentari. They warn you differently. They warn you with silence. And silence in places like this is always the loudest sound of all. Number 4. Torre Annunziata, Italy. 30 kilometers south of Naples, the road hugs the coastline and the view becomes extraordinary. Mount Vesuvius rises to your left, ancient and enormous, the same volcano that buried Pompeii under 4 meters of ash in 79 AD. The sea glitters to your right, and straight ahead, squeezed between geological history and the Tyrrhenian coast, sits Torre Annunziata, a town so beautiful in its setting and so brutal in its reality that the contrast feels almost deliberate, almost like a punishment. Torre Annunziata holds the distinction, in certain years, of recording the highest murder rate of any municipality in Italy. Not Naples, not Palermo. This town of fewer than 45,000 people. The Camorra, the Neapolitan organized crime network that predates the Sicilian mafia by centuries, runs deep here, threaded through the local economy the way salt is threaded through seawater. You cannot separate it out. It is structural. Clans have divided the town into territories so precisely mapped that locals navigate daily life around invisible lines drawn in blood. Outsiders cannot see these lines. That is precisely what makes them dangerous. Drive through Torre Annunziata and you will see laundry hanging between Baroque balconies, old men playing cards in the evening light, children on bicycles in the shadow of Vesuvius. It looks like a painting. It functions like a minefield. Do not confuse the two. Number 3. Scampia, Naples, Italy. There is a building type that architects now study as a case study in how design can destroy a community. In Scampia, on the northern edge of Naples, they are called le vele, the sails. Enormous, sail-shaped residential towers built in the 1960s and 70s as a utopian solution to Naples' chronic housing crisis. The architect envisioned elevated walkways connecting the towers into a single, continuous community, a city within a city. A modernist dream rendered in reinforced concrete. What happened instead is one of the most documented urban failures in European history. The walkways became corridors of crime. The design, meant to create connection, created instead a labyrinth. Impossible to police, impossible to surveil, perfect for the Camorra. At the peak of its notoriety in the 1990s, Scampia was the largest open-air heroin market in Europe. Hundreds of millions of euros in narcotics changed hands annually inside Le Vele. The murder rate during clan wars reached numbers that belong in a war zone, not a European city. The Italian television series Gomorrah, watched in 150 countries, is set here. Residents will tell you that the show did not exaggerate. Several of the original towers have since been demolished. The remaining ones are being cleared. But the community they created, the poverty, the dependency, the generational trauma, does not come down with the concrete. Scampia is rebuilding, slowly, painfully, and with no guarantee of what comes next. Number 2. Cosenza, Calabria, Italy. There are cities in southern Italy so ancient, so layered with history, that walking through them feels like moving through a compressed archive of Western civilization. Cosenza is one of them. The Bruzzi tribe settled here before Rome existed. Alaric the Visigoth, the man who sacked Rome itself in 410 AD, is said to be buried beneath the Busento River that runs through the old town. Philosophers, poets, and humanist scholars walked these streets during the Renaissance. The historic center of Cosenza, perched above the river junction, is genuinely, breathtakingly beautiful. And it is the capital of the territory controlled by the 'Ndrangheta, the Calabrian organized crime organization that Europol and the FBI now consistently rank as the most powerful and most dangerous criminal network on the planet. The 'Ndrangheta is not like the Sicilian mafia of American cinema. It is not theatrical. It does not leave messages. It is quiet, familial, and planetary in its reach, operating cocaine distribution networks that span from Colombian cartels to Australian ports to German financial institutions. Its home base is Calabria, and Cosenza sits at its heart. The poverty rate in the surrounding province runs above 30%. Entire sectors of the local economy, construction, waste management, public contracts, function as extensions of clan business. Locals do not talk about it openly. That reticence is not discretion. It is survival. You can eat the best pasta of your life in Cosenza's old town at noon and be 2 streets from a clan meeting by evening. The beauty is real. So is everything underneath it. Number 1. Tirana, Albania. Here is what nobody tells you about Tirana. On the surface, it is one of the most surprisingly vibrant capitals in southeastern Europe. Colorful buildings, young population. A city that has transformed itself visually and economically with remarkable speed since the end of communist isolation in the early 1990s. Tourists are starting to discover it. Travel magazines are calling it the next great European city break. And all of that is true, in the way that the surface of water is true, accurate, visible, and completely misleading about what moves beneath it. Albania has the highest per capita rate of organized crime involvement of any European Union candidate state. Tirana is its operational center. Albanian criminal networks, among the most sophisticated and ruthless in Europe according to Europol's annual threat assessments, run heroin and cocaine distribution across the continent, control significant human trafficking routes, and have penetrated political and judicial institutions at levels that make reform structurally difficult. The city itself carries a violent crime rate that spikes in specific districts with a consistency that locals have long since mapped and tourists have not. Certain neighborhoods after dark are not dangerous because they are poor. They are dangerous because they are deliberately ungoverned, because ungovernance is, for some, a business model. Tirana is number 1 on this list, not because it is the most visibly broken place we have visited. It is number 1 because it is the most deceptive. It looks like a success story. It is partly one. And that partial truth is exactly what makes it the most instructive stop on this entire journey. These places are not anomalies. They are not accidents. They are the product of decisions, political decisions, economic decisions, architectural decisions, made over decades by people who were never going to live with the consequences. Every hollowed-out industrial city on this list was hollowed out by someone. Every neighborhood abandoned by the state was abandoned deliberately. Every beautiful facade built over a broken system was built by someone who preferred the facade. Europe is not a postcard. It is a continent with a long memory and a complicated present. The towns on this list are part of that present, whether the guidebooks acknowledge them or not. So the next time a local catches your eye on a quiet road and says, without drama, without exaggeration, "Do not stop here." Listen to them. They are not being theatrical. They are being precise. And precision, in places like these, is the difference between a story you tell later and one that gets told about you.